Hello and welcome to Prolife Primetime News. Today is Friday, March 8th. I'm Leslie Palma.
And I'm Teresa Watson. Thanks for joining us this evening. In our top story, we'll report on last night's State of the Union address and its disturbingly pro-abortion message. We'll have reaction from Priests for Life National Director Frank Pavone.
There's an insidious effort in academia to stifle the research of pro-life scholars. Dr. Priscilla Coleman, one of the scholars whose work has been under attack, will join us.
The political landscape became clearer after Super Tuesday, with former President Donald Trump and incumbent Joe Biden almost certain to replay the 2020 election. Republican challenger Nikki Haley formally dropped out of the race, and Arizona Senator Krysten Sinema is calling it quits. I'll have all the details in political news in a nutshell.
Women's health was in the crosshairs this week with announcements that 2 national pharmacy chains will begin selling the abortion pill, and the first ever over-the-counter birth control pill will be available at a pharmacy near you. I'll have these stories and more in Abortion in the News.
Brian Kemper, president of Stand True and Priests for Life director of youth outreach and street activism, will join us to talk about a very special Women in History Month project he's embarked on. Please stay with us.
President Biden's third and potentially final State of the Union address was described by the liberal media today as fiery and combative. But what we heard was an elderly man whose skin seemed to be too tight, flubbing his lines and combining exaggeration with outright lies. We knew abortion would loom large in the more than hour-long speech, and we knew Biden would lie about one of the guests seated with First Lady Jill Biden. Let's go to the videotape.
My predecessor came to office determined to see Roe v. Wade overturned. He's the reason it was overturned, and he brags about it. Look at the chaos that has resulted. Joining us tonight is Kate Cox, the wife and mother from Dallas. She's become pregnant again and had a fetus with a fatal condition. Her doctor told Kate that her own life and her ability to have children in the future were at risk if she didn't act. Because Texas law banned her ability to act, Kate and her husband had to leave the state to get what she needed. What her family got through should have never happened as well, but it's happening in too many others. There are state laws banning the freedom to choose, criminalizing doctors, forcing survivors of rape and incest to leave their states to get the treatment they need. Many of you in this chamber and my predecessor are promising to pass a national ban on reproductive freedom. My God, what freedom else would you take away? Look, it's a decision to overturn Roe v. Wade. The Supreme Court majority wrote the following, and with all due respect, justices, women are not without electoral power. Electoral or political power. You're about to realize just how much you're right about that. Clearly. Clearly, those bragging about overturning Roe v. Wade have no clue about the power of women.
The truth about the Kate Cox situation is that her daughter received a prenatal diagnosis of trisomy 18, a life-limiting chromosomal disorder. Carrying a baby with the condition does not jeopardize the health of the mother, nor impair future fertility. If Kate Cox's life were in danger, she would have been able to have an abortion in Texas. But the media dutifully reported the lies that were fed, never asking in exactly what way Cox's life was imperiled. Last night, Biden repeated the lies from the biggest podium on earth, but none of the fact-checking we've seen today mentions this dangerous and calculated lie.
Cox was just one of several abortion advocates invited by the First Lady and Democrat members of Congress, but Republicans had some pretty high-caliber guests in the audience as well. Ohio Representative Warren Davidson invited Dr. Ron Archer, an ordained minister and abortion survivor whose mother became pregnant with him when she was an underage human trafficking victim.
House Speaker Mike Johnson invited Janet Dorig, executive director of the Capitol Hill Pregnancy Center in D.C., one of the more than 200 pro-life facilities vandalized during the reign of terror against pro-lifers that followed the 2022 overturning of Roe v. Wade. Virginia Representative Bob Good invited well-known pro-life activist Ryan Baumberger, who was conceived in rape and raised in a loving, multi-ethnic adoptive home.
Biden repeatedly messed up his lines, and my favorite flub was when he was railing against the fall of Roe v. Wade and said, to the Supreme Court justices, "My God, what freedom else would you take away?" The Washington Post helpfully cleaned up the quote, reporting in at least one story this morning that he said, "My God, what freedoms will you take away next?" which is not what he said.
His many mistakes were overlooked in most coverage, though some outlets mildly chided Biden for referring to a Venezuelan man who snuck into the U.S. in 2022 as an illegal. The man, Jose Ibarra, has been arrested and charged with the murder of Georgia College student Laken Riley. Urged by Georgia Republican Representative Marjorie Taylor Greene to say her name, Biden did, but he mispronounced it, calling her Lincoln Riley.
Priests for Life National Director Frank Pavone watched the State of the Union from California and sent us his reactions this morning.
Well, hi, friends. Pro-life leader Frank Pavone here with some reaction to the Biden State of the Union address. Listen, I knew it was going to be a very unenviable job for someone who was presiding over a deliberate destruction of our nation to deliver a State of the Union address when most people think he's doing a terrible job, when most people think he cannot even physically or mentally manage a second term. This was essentially a political speech aimed at getting back the base that he needs to get reelected, a base that he is seriously losing, seriously eroding, even in the demographics that are so important to the Democrats, like blacks, Hispanics, the youth vote, and yes, even suburban women. He mentioned abortion, although he didn't use the word, which is consistent with what I've been telling you. They don't want to talk about abortion. They want to pretend that this is a one-dimensional issue only affecting the woman's reproductive freedom. Hey, what about the second life involved, which is what makes abortion such an intractable debate? But no mention of that. And as I told you, he lied about Kate Cox, the woman from Texas, who was a guest of the president and the first lady at that State of the Union address last night. He lied. He said her life was in danger because of the Texas abortion law. It was not. She could have gotten an abortion in Texas with the situation that she had, that she claimed to have a medical problem. Her doctor simply needed to attest, something her doctor did not do, to the idea that either her life or her physical health were in serious danger. Supreme Court of Texas pointed out her doctor did not do that. The man is a liar. The man is a failure. The speech was an embarrassment. And you and I need to take this speech as a clear sign of what the November campaign is going to be like. Pretty desperate news for the Democrats.
As Women's History Month got underway this week, women's health and safety took a hit. Two leading national pharmacy chains, CVS and Walgreens, announced they would begin selling the deadly abortion drug mifepristone in states where it's legal to do so. Walgreens said it will begin dispensing mifepristone to those with a prescription in New York, Pennsylvania, Massachusetts, California, and Illinois, eventually expanding to locations in all legally permissible states. CVS will peddle the drug in Massachusetts and Rhode Island to start. Vice President Kamala Harris, apparently misunderstanding the nature of mifepristone, issued a statement saying this is an important step to ensure women have access to the health care they need. Also this week, it was announced that the first ever over-the-counter birth control pill would be available within weeks at the nation's pharmacies. This despite the fact that the World Health Organization classifies oral contraceptives as known carcinogens. After 16 Republican attorneys general complained to YouTube about a misleading context note that accompanied a video posted by Alliance Defending Freedom, the video sharing platform amended the notice. The video in question features a young woman describing her chemical abortion. Let's watch the video and then look at the context note.
The pain was so severe, and I was so scared, and I was bleeding so heavily, I thought I was going to die. When they gave me the abortion drugs, they told me that I would experience a double period, and I might experience some light cramping, and that I would be back to work on Monday. I experienced profuse bleeding, intense cramping that was labor pains. I've had 4 children since then, and I experienced labor. Tylenol, Advil, nothing stopped the pain. Nausea, vomiting, tremors. There's nothing like being completely abandoned in the greatest moment of need. I didn't have a nurse. I didn't have a doctor. And when I was reaching about a month of bleeding, I started to wonder if maybe I was gonna bleed forever. But who was gonna help me? It's time for the Supreme Court to hold the FDA accountable. It's time for them to defend us.
The original context note added by YouTube read, "Abortion is a procedure to end a pregnancy. It uses medicine or surgery to remove the embryo or fetus and placenta from the uterus. The procedure is done by a licensed healthcare professional." The Attorneys General, led by Iowa Attorney General Brenna Bird, said the notice is false and misleading because it clearly states the procedure is performed by a healthcare professional, while Elizabeth Gillette, the woman in the video, makes the point that she was all alone and feared she might bleed to death. In a statement to Fox News Digital, Bird said, "YouTube's campaign misrepresents chemical abortions, targets pro-life messages, and puts real lives in danger." On Wednesday, the context note was amended to make clear the difference between surgical and chemical abortion, but it calls the latter a medical abortion, a term that is itself misleading. A judge in Butte last Friday struck down 3 2021 Montana laws designed to protect babies and their mothers. One of the laws would have restricted abortion to the first 20 weeks of pregnancy. Another required moms to see a physician in person and wait 24 hours before starting a chemical abortion. And the third would have offered mothers a chance to see their baby on ultrasound. The State Department of Justice said it would appeal the judge's rulings. And finally, last week I reported that France was on the verge of being the first nation in the world to make the right to an abortion part of its constitution. This week, it's official. With crowds of abortion lovers cheering from the ground, the famous Eiffel Tower was lit up and emblazoned with the words, "My body, my choice," and "Aborto legal." Let's have a look. Keep in mind that France is suffering from such a low birth rate that it is actually paying couples to have children. Good luck with that now, France. And that's Abortion in the News.
On February 5th, the academic publisher Sage retracted 2 studies showing the dangers of the abortion drug mifepristone that was cited in a federal district court judge's decision to suspend FDA approval of the drug. The publisher said the authors of the study had undisclosed conflicts of interest and their findings were unreliable. The retraction came just 6 weeks before the U.S. Supreme Court will hear oral arguments in the case that could impact how mifepristone may be prescribed and distributed, and how late into pregnancy it can be used.
Pro-lifers see this effort to retract research as part of an insidious plot to silence their voices. Now more than a dozen pro-abortion academic researchers are calling for the retraction of 4 more studies published from 2002 to 2011 that concluded abortion can be harmful to women's mental health. In commentary published in the British Medical Journal, the abortion advocates say that if women have mental problems after abortion, it's likely they had those problems before making the choice for abortion.
Dr. Priscilla Coleman is a scholar and researcher well acquainted with the perils of reporting the truth about abortion, and we've asked her to join us this evening to talk about this troubling new trend of retracting the truth. For decades, Dr. Coleman was a professor of human development and family studies at the University of Bowling Green in Ohio. And she's a researcher with a long list of scholarly journals that have published her work. Welcome to the show, Dr. Coleman.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here. I appreciate you interviewing me today.
So, Dr. Coleman, my jaw literally dropped when I read about this latest attempt to have 4 studies retracted. What was your reaction when you heard about it?
Well, I honestly wasn't terribly surprised. I've been publishing on this topic since 1995, and it's always been a struggle despite the quality of the methodology. I've published in other areas, so very easily, so that the studies actually have tended to be tighter, stronger methodologically, and so oftentimes I would have to submit an article many times, different journals, in order to get a fair review and to have it ultimately published. So I've seen the struggle for quite some time. But this new level of attack is definitely a shift. And I believe it's dated since Roe went down. We've seen much more aggressiveness. Although I've served as an expert many times, continue to do so. And I think because we've had such victories in the legal realm, the effort from the other side is to remove scholars from the courtrooms. So the way to do that is to attack their credibility. And the most effective way to attack someone's credibility is to have their articles removed, retracted from the journals. So it's definitely at a whole new level. And I saw this tsunami coming when the first attack on one of my articles occurred in 2022. And I can speak to that, or we can continue to I can answer questions, but very briefly, the first attack on my credibility on one of my articles occurred in 2022. I was notified by Cambridge Press, the editor of the British Journal of Psychiatry, which published my meta-analysis, which has received a great deal of attention worldwide. I spent several years traveling and describing the findings because it was a meta-analysis, a quantitative review of the literature, incorporating 22 studies and nearly 900,000 women. And the British Journal of Psychiatry is very prestigious. And so this attack in 2022 occurred 11 years post-publication, had been cited over 300 times in other journal articles. And basically what occurred is 17 or 18, I can't remember the exact number, very pro-choice oriented researchers, some activists, wrote to the editor and in a page and a half said that the article needed to be removed on scientific grounds. Well, I hired some excellent attorneys out of Cleveland, and I wrote a 40-page rebuttal. 8 months later, Cambridge Press came down on my side. The article remains in the literature, and there was a lot of upheaval in England. A few editors resigned in protest. So that just shows the aggressiveness of the situation. I was vindicated in the end, but as soon as that ended, another attack began, and that one I'm still waiting for an outcome. It's with the Journal of Psychiatric Research. I have my lawyers involved. I wrote an extensive rebuttal. That was submitted in July of last year. Still no answer. And one article I had was retracted. It was a critique of the Turnaway study, which is the biggest effort by pro-choice researchers to demonstrate empirically that abortion does not harm women. It's not associated with any poor mental health issues or relationship problems. It was an extensive effort funded by Warren Buffett to the University of California at San Francisco, $88 million. And the methodology is so poor that I had my undergraduate students identify the flaws in the study. So basically that article in Frontiers laid out all of the methodological problems, and these were problems that I testified in courts across the United States that were true. I poured over their manual for the study, and this is really not a minor issue because they've flooded our journals with 60 articles over 60 from that very poor study design. And so I wrote about it. I had been testifying about it. I thought I'll put this in an article, and it was not in the journal more than a few months before it was retracted. And I was not given the opportunity to defend it like with the other two situations. So it's aggressive. It feels like a war. I mean, I've had such success publishing over 60 journal articles. And now, I wonder, are they going to now go through every single article and I'll go broke? I can't afford lawyers forever. But it's happening to other people now. And so I tried to warn individuals and groups, but I don't think anybody anticipated the level of aggression that we're seeing.
Well, Priscilla, it seems to me that every study coming out of the Guttmacher Institute, the University of California, San Francisco, and other facilities funded by abortion advocates always concludes that abortion is safe and consequence-free. Is that how you've seen research over the years?
Well, I've seen both. I've seen many studies. There are hundreds of studies now that have shown that abortion is associated with increased risk for mental health problems and relationship problems, parenting problems, all sorts of outcomes. There's a huge literature, but unfortunately that it doesn't get much media attention. And then there are many studies that have shown that abortion is not associated with any compromised mental or physical health outcomes. But if you really scrutinize the studies, they're not well off. Often when the conclusion is that abortion is benign, you're going to find sampling problems, measurement problems, all kinds of issues, but the bias is in favor of publishing those studies. So when the authors submit their papers for peer review, they just fly through the process and the flaws are ignored. They become part of the mainstream literature, and the average person doesn't have the scientific background to really discern which studies are reliable and which ones are questionable. And the same thing happens in the courtrooms because judges don't necessarily have the background to really decipher which studies are the good ones and which ones are the ones that are problematic. And that's part of the reason that I retired, because I'm planning on I am working with an institute now, where the International Institute for Reproductive Loss, and our goal is to package the literature, the enormous literature, make it readily accessible to the average person, develop new initiatives for research that needs to be done. And so we want to package it, we want to develop it, and we want to fight these types of attacks.
So, Dr. Coleman, can what happens in the pages of these journals impact abortion policy in the U.S.?
It definitely can, because the policies need evidence to support them. New laws need evidence. And so both sides always hire experts and have this research summarized and for judges to consider in terms of making laws, like waiting period laws, counseling laws. There are all kinds of restrictions that were enacted prior to Roe, and many of the states are trying to maintain them now. But yes, absolutely, it is. The science is necessary, and if the other side is effective and pulling all of our studies or many of our studies, culling the literature, women won't be versed on the adverse consequences. They can't make informed decisions when the literature is all one-sided and based on very poor methodologies.
Well, you've retired from teaching and embarked on something new. Can you tell us about it?
Yes, I'm serving as the science director for the International Institute for Reproductive Loss. It's a newly established nonprofit organization. Kaylin Carlson is the founder. She's wonderful to work with. She has spoken nationally about her own experience of an abortion, and she's a trained counselor now working on her PhD. And so we have been working diligently to package the science. We have a number of research recaps that have journal articles and bullet points, and we now have 10 PowerPoints that have been put together. The idea is we are going to package this literature and we're going to make it clear which studies are reliable and why, which ones are not. And so the information that we'll be providing to other researchers, to professionals, to lawyers, judges, will be at their fingertips. And this is a long overdue need in the research community and for practitioners, for women. And so we're working now actually this weekend on getting the website going. I wanted to wait until we had sufficient information to offer. We will also have an extensive annotated bibliography of the world literature that people will be able to download and use. We're up to 130 summaries, and I anticipate that'll probably be 600 or 700 journal articles will be summarized. And so, and we also want to be there for people, individual researchers and organizations that come under attack with these issues, like the retractions and the smearing of people's reputations. So it's an ambitious agenda or objective, but we are broadening it to not just abortion, but literature on reproductive loss generally. So we'll be looking at miscarriage, stillbirth, early neonatal loss, and loss through adoption as well.
Well, we certainly wish you the best and hope your studies prevail over this ideological censorship. And thanks so much for joining us. And please come back and keep us updated.
We'll be happy to. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thanks.
Good night.
Good night.
Good night.
At the top of political news this week, former President Donald Trump and President Joe Biden romped through more than a dozen states on Super Tuesday, all but cementing a November rematch and pushing the former president's last major rival, Nikki Haley, out of the Republican race. Their victories from coast to coast, including the delegate-rich states of California and Texas, left little doubt about the trajectory of the race. Haley won Vermont, denying Trump a full sweep, but the former president carried other states that might have been favorable to her, such as Virginia, Massachusetts, and Maine, which have large swaths of moderate voters, like those who have backed her in previous primaries. On Wednesday morning, Haley announced from her home state of South Carolina that she was suspending her campaign. Here is what she had to say regarding endorsing Donald Trump.
Our country is too precious to let our differences divide us. I have always been a conservative Republican and always supported the Republican nominee. But on this question, as she did on so many others, Margaret Thatcher provided some good advice when she said, quote, "Never just follow the crowd. Always make up your own mind."
Earlier in the week, Donald Trump won the North Dakota Republican presidential caucuses on Monday. Trump also swept a trio of states on Saturday, inching his way closer to a formal grasp of the party's nomination for president. Trump notched victories in the Missouri and Idaho caucuses and also gained the 39 delegates available at Michigan's convention caucuses. Not enough states will have voted until later this month for Trump or Biden to formally become their party's presumptive nominees, but the primary's biggest day made their rematch a near certainty. Both the 81-year-old Biden and the 77-year-old Trump continued to dominate their parties. While much of the focus was on the presidential race, there were also important down-ballot contests. The governor's race took shape in North Carolina, where Republican Lieutenant Governor Mark Robinson and Democratic Attorney General Josh Stein will face off in a state that both parties are fiercely contesting ahead of November. In California, Democratic Republican Adam Schiff and Republican Steve Garvey, a former Los Angeles Dodgers baseball player, advanced to the general election race to fill the Senate seat long held by Dianne Feinstein. Senator Krysten Sinema, an independent from Arizona, announced that she will not seek re-election this year, avoiding an unpredictable three-way race in the swing state that had many national Democrats worried about holding on to the seat. "I believe in my approach, but it's not what America wants right now," Sinema said in a video announcing her plans that painted a bleak picture of a dysfunctional political system she no longer sees a place in. In her remarks, Sinema stressed several bipartisan accomplishments she helped broker during her time in the chamber, but said that her deal-making political style was no longer appreciated in a world in which compromise is a dirty word. Sinema's plans have been a topic of intense speculation in Washington ever since she left the Democratic Party in 2022, declaring herself an independent. Representative Ruben Gallego, Democrat, entered the race more than a year ago, while Carrie Lake, a former gubernatorial candidate and TV news anchor, is widely expected to nab the Republican nomination. And that's political news in a nutshell.
Women's History Month had its origins as a national celebration in 1981 when Congress passed Public Law 9728, which authorized and requested the president to proclaim the week beginning March 7, 1982, as Women's History Week. Over the next 5 years, Congress continued to pass joint resolutions designating a week in March as Women's History Week. In 1987, after being petitioned by the National Women's History Project, Congress passed Public Law 109, which designated the month of March 1987 as Women's History Month.
Between 1988 and 1994, Congress passed additional resolutions requesting and authorizing the president to proclaim March of each year as Women's History Month. Since 1995, presidents have issued a series of annual proclamations designated the month of March as Women's History Month. These proclamations celebrate the contributions women have made to the United States and recognize the specific achievements women have made over the course of American history in a variety of fields.
Brian Kemper, president of Stand True and a pastoral associate of Priests for Life, is focusing on a different group of women not usually recognized in the liberal media. He's joining us tonight to tell us about it. Welcome to the show, Brian.
Well, thank you for having me. It's always an honor to be on this show.
Well, Brian, tell us what special group of women Stand True is focusing on during this month.
Well, you know, it's probably, in my opinion, some of the greatest women on the planet. And those are women that have dedicated their lives to ending the abortion holocaust. We're talking about pro-life women in history, women who lead this movement, who have helped found this movement, and who truly have done a lot to save the lives of innocent, precious little babies.
Well, as we know, there are many more than 31 pro-life women heroes.
Yes.
How'd you choose who to celebrate?
You know, it's very hard. It was actually very hard because I went over that list. There's probably countless numbers. There's so many that are not on the list this year that will be on in following years. But you just had to go through and make choices, and a lot of it was women that I've had the honor of serving under. Like yesterday was Judy Brown. She's one of the greatest heroes of the pro-life movement, the founder of American Life League. And I got to work with her for years in the 90s. So someone like that, or Janet Morana of Priests for Life, or then you have Mother Teresa, or different people like that. It's eye-opening to see how many amazing, powerful, wonderful pro-life women leaders we have in this country.
So, Brian, you mentioned the women that are not on the list that, will make it next year. So are you committed to keeping this as an annual project of Stand True?
Oh, absolutely. This is going to be something we do every year. There's enough women to recognize we can do Women's History Decade if we really wanted to. The pro-life movement is, the other side always talks about, the men. But truly, most of the greatest leaders in the pro-life movement have been women. And it's such an honor to work with them.
So where can our viewers go to find out more?
Well, you can go directly to standtrue.com, our website, or if you follow me on social media at Brian Kemper, that's Brian with a Y, I'm tweeting about a new woman every day of the month and posting on Instagram, Twitter, TikTok, and such. So follow my social medias or go to standtrue.com. And of course, Priests for Life website will have it also.
Great.
Well, Brian, thank you so much for joining us tonight and for highlighting the important contributions to the pro-life movement these remarkable women have made. We really appreciate it.
And thank you, because you two are both amazing women of God who stand up for babies. So we want to honor you guys too.
All right. Well, thank you.
Thank you. Good night, Brian.
Good night, Brian.
Good night.
Thank you so much for joining us on Pro-Life Primetime News, produced at Priests for Life headquarters in Titusville, Florida.
If you like our show, please support us by making a donation to prolifegift.org. These donations help fund all of our work here at Priests for Life, which enables us to continue educating, equipping, and activating God's people to end abortion. For all your pro-life news updates during the week, please follow us on X at Pro-Life News Show. I'm Teresa Watson, Executive Manager.
I'm Leslie Palma, Communications Director. Remember, life is the only choice.